Well, it's that time of the week where we bring you the weekly episode of the Trading Bell. This week on the show, we'll be talking matters energy. I'll be speaking to the Managing Director for Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, KETRACO, FCPA, Fernandes Barasa. He'll be talking to us about plans by the company to list at the stock exchange, as well as what lies in the pipeline when it comes to delivering cheaper power for Kenyans. Coming up is that interview. But first, let's take a look at his profile.
Mr. Fernandes Barasa is the Managing Director for the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, KETRACO. He previously served as the Chief Manager, Finance and Accounts. He also served as Acting Managing Director and CEO since 1st of August 2015. He was also the Treasury Manager and later Head of Factories Accounts at the Kenya Tea Development Authority Limited. Barasa has also worked for Kenya Airways and East Africa Reinsurance in senior management positions. Barasa is also a fellow and former chairman of the Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, a lead auditor and Certified Public Accountant of Kenya. He has a wealth of experience in public finance management, risk management and corporate governance, among others.
Thank you, sir, for making time for us. In accounting language, we call you FCPA.
Yes.
Fernandes Barasa.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you on the program. And it's a very interesting year for Kenyans battling a pandemic of unknown proportions. And I'd just like to pick it up from you. How has it been for the company? How have you been able to manage? And have you been keeping safe at your level?
Yeah, thank you very much, Agina. I can say that this COVID-19 has been unprecedented pandemic across the board. It's actually affected operations in KETRACO because for the last 6 months from March up to almost October, we had to invoke a clause of force majeure, where we suspended construction of works purposely for making sure that our staff and also the contractors are safe because we could not enforce the social distance. In KETRACO, priority of our staff is safety, and because of that pandemic issue, definitely we had to take action. We have also made sure that we've bought all our staff protective equipment. We have sanitizers across the board. We also have masks all over the place for all our clients who work in. We also have programs where staff are working on shifts just to avoid congestion in the office. So we've taken this very seriously. Of course, in terms of operations, we have scaled down the operations. Where we have the operations which go on 24/7, for example, the substations.
Yes.
Those ones, of course, they are working 24/7, but just trying to maintain all the protective equipment on, and also making sure that they sanitize. But by and large, I can say that the pandemic has really affected operations of KETRACO.
All right.
Yeah.
And of course, the next question would be, by this affecting operations, how does it impact on Kenyans who are anticipating some projects to be completed, contractors who had already been mobilizing on the ground? How will this pan out?
Well, because there was a delay by almost 6 to 7 months, definitely the completion date for projects was extended. We've had to do addendums basically to extend the project completion dates. Although some of the priority projects, definitely we are trying to accelerate production and construction.
Okay.
But there are some projects which are very critical in view of the outputs expected. But some of the non-priority projects, what we've done is just to do an extension of the terms of completion. The beauty about the extension is without prejudice, so there are no cost implications on the extensions.
All right.
Yeah.
And I know we'll talk more about the projects, and just talk to us about the role KETRACO has in our economy in terms of providing key, actually being in the middle of the value chain. When you look at the power value chain in terms of transmission, and so far, how has it been in terms of rollout of key projects in the country?
Now, with regard to the role KETRACO plays in our economy, first and foremost, we have the Vision 2030, where energy is a key enabler. And for the country to achieve the middle-income economy status by Vision 2030, definitely energy becomes a very important ingredient. And what we are looking for is to provide stability and reliability of power. Definitely Kenya, for it to become an industrialized nation, we need power that is stable, power that is reliable, so that we attract investors to come on board. Now that's where now KETRACO comes on board, where we've been in existence for the last 11 years or so. And we have tried to make sure that the power that is transmitted right from generation up to distribution, so we are a conduit, is stable. Now, some of our mandates, just to break it down, we have 3 or 4 categories of our transmission lines. The first category are those lines that are meant to facilitate rural access. And this is basically the expansion of the national grid and also connectivity. We have those lines which are meant, those are mostly the 132 kV lines. We also have lines which are basically meant to strengthen the national grid and provide stability of power. For example, Mombasa-Nairobi is meant to strengthen the system and also to address issues of power outages. We have some other specific lines that are meant for evacuating power from generation to the load centers for distribution. A very good example is Luangalani-Suswa, which we commissioned 2 years ago. This is meant to evacuate power all the way from generation point in Luangalani up to Suswa. We also have lines that are meant to interconnect with our neighboring countries. We call them regional interconnectors.
Yes.
And a very good example is Ethiopia, Kenya, that is meant to facilitate regional integration and also regional power trade between Kenya and Ethiopia. So those are the 4 categories of the transmission lines. And what we've done so far since I joined KETRACO, that is in 2010, we've progressively brought almost 2,500 kilometers of transmission lines and over 60 substations, high voltage substations from 132 up to 220 kV. So all whatever we brought on board has managed to address the stability of power.
All right. And Mr. Fernandes, of course, to undertake such projects, you require a huge capital outlay.
Yes.
In terms of funding. And talk to us about the size and budgets that we've been looking at as a country. Are we on the right track in terms of prioritizing electricity transmission projects? And what is still unfinished?
Okay. So far, the amounts of capital outlay that has been put in the transmission network is around $2 billion. That's around 200 billion Kenya shillings. When you look at the planned projects for the next 4 to 5 years, we are looking at another investment of around 180 billion Kenya shillings. Of course, for the next 10 years, because we have a transmission master plan, we are looking at 450 billion Kenya shillings. So there is some funding gap, which of course we'll be looking at other alternative financing options, like for example PPPs, the public-private partnerships, and also maybe private initiated investment projects. So one thing that I can tell you is the investment which has been put in the transmission network is a very capital intensive investment. and largely from the DFIs and also from the government of Kenya. Yeah.
And speaking about public-private partnerships, we do know that President Uhuru Kenyatta recently signed an energy partnership in France. Perhaps you could elaborate more on this, and what is the significance of that in terms of the bigger picture when you look at improving power transmission and making power affordable?
I want to say that as KETRACO, we are actually beneficiaries of that agreement which the president signed with his counterpart in France, because there are some projects which are implemented. We call them government-to-government projects. And one of the projects that was a beneficiary of that agreement was a Menengai-Rongai project, a 400 kV project, where GE, which is a government or rather a company that is based in France, are the ones who are meant to implement that project. Now, once the project is implemented, that is Menengai-Rongai, is a 400 kV project, it's going to strengthen power in Menengai and Rongai, and because of the investments opportunities around Nakuru, and also we also have a very heavy production of geothermal, that is in Silali and Baringo.
Yeah.
So this line is going to be very critical. So I can say that we are very ready to commence that project once we address all the pre-construction activities, right from the environmental social assessments, resettlement action plans, and also obtaining the necessary NEMA licenses.
Okay.
So we are looking at implementation of that project taking place maybe for the next 36 months. Yeah.
And in terms of this particular project, does it mean this is the new trend where governments are working towards getting favorable funding agreements signed in the place of what you actually said earlier, that we have funding gaps?
Well, I know that is one of the options because we have also had some G2G programs, for example. Earlier, Luangalani Suswa, the government of Spain signed an agreement with Kenya. We also have some projects which are being implemented by Exim Bank of India, where the government of India, through Exim Bank of India, signs an agreement with the government of Kenya. Of course, the bigger one is the government of China, through Exim Bank of China, which was implementing SGR. And we also have some other projects which, in the energy sector, are being implemented by Chinese companies. So there are quite a number of those G2G programs, which of course addresses the financing gap.
And Mr. Barasa, looking at this dynamics facing funding of infrastructure for energy, what would you look at, especially now that your big brother, that is Kenya Power, which is a listed company, has the latitude to be able to raise funding through the stock markets. As KETRACO, is it something that you'd also consider pursuing into the future in terms of getting to be listed at the Securities Exchange?
As I told you, looking at the transmission master plan, we have a funding gap of almost $4.5 billion US dollars. This is amounting to around 450 billion Kenya shillings. Now, one of the options of addressing the funding gap, of course, is through listing. So it's a conversation that we can pick up with the National Treasury. So for me, being a finance man, I think listing is one of the options for generating funds for development projects.
All right.
Yeah.
For many Kenyans, when they hear of electricity or power, the only company that normally comes to mind is Kenya Power. Majority don't know the level of work that is done by KETRACO. Perhaps just appraise us on some of your key projects and what economic impact have these projects had in the economy?
Well, of course, when you look at Kenya Power, the fact that this is the mother of all the companies around energy sector, having been the first to be incorporated before independence. So you cannot fault Kenyans for addressing everything to Kenya Power until 1997, when the unbundling started by creating KenGen to do generation. And then, of course, KETRACO, GDC came on board pursuant of the sessional paper number 4 of 2004, which came on board in 2006, that now gave rise to KETRACO formation in 2008. When you look at the mandate of KETRACO, is very specific, basically to address the generation, or rather transmission of electricity. And it was a very deliberate, I can say, strategy by government.
Yes.
To form KETRACO, because Kenya Power is quasi-government. It is owned by the government, 51%, and also private shareholders, so it's quasi-government. And when you look at the investments involved in transmission, you require government intervention. And because the government will not invest in an institution that is quasi-government, it gave now merit for the formation of KETRACO, which is 100% owned by government, so that government can now take the investments and also borrow funds for purposes of addressing the transmission infrastructure, which is very critical for any industrialization strategy for the government. So when you look at the projects that we are doing, the first line to be energized in KETRACO, that was Mumias Rangala in 2010. Don't ask me about Mumias, but of course, it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
By energizing that line in 2010, immediately after the line came on board to the national grid, after 6 months, it was already overloaded. What does it tell you? We have suppressed demand. So what is happening right now is the generation and transmission are working closely together to address the demand, which is suppressed. So anytime we have a transmission line coming on board, that's when investors now will start putting up the investments. And that's why I'm talking about suppressed demand. Maybe just for the numbers, so far we have 2,788 megawatts of power that is installed capacity, vis-a-vis 1,944. The demand has started now increasing. For the last 3 months, it was 1,800. Now we are talking about 1944. So when you look at the difference, we are talking about suppressed demand because we don't have a transmission line that is meant to address the consumption.
Okay.
Now what KETRACO is doing, of course, by bringing on board high voltage transmission lines, for example, Mombasa, Nairobi, we have now provided a framework for the establishment of special economic zones in Athi River, in Voi, along the line. And these are going to now create employment opportunities. And this, of course, will ultimately increase the demand. Another very good example of addressing demand is Olkara Lesos Kisumu. This is a 400 kV transmission line, 300 kilometers, starting all the way from Olkaria, traversing through Lesos up to Kisumu. Now, once this line is completed, which we are focusing by 31st of January, the line is going to evacuate power. Almost the demand of Western can be addressed of 200 megawatts of power, geothermal, to the Western region. Of course, in terms of the focus, we also want to progress from Kisumu up to Kakamega, we have a line that is 78 kilometers, 220 kV. That is a Kisumu, Kakamega, Musaga. Now this line again is going to facilitate transfer of power. That is geothermal from Kibos in Kisumu all the way to Musaga substation in Kakamega. So we are trying to now to upgrade that substation to address all the issues of stability of power in Kakamega and the environs, Busia and Bungoma.
All right.
So you can clearly see that we have a very strategic approach in addressing demand. When you go to the coast region, the first line that we brought on board in 2015, that was Rabai Garissa, Rabai Malindi. Garissa Lamu is at 220 kV. It has actually provided stability of power. And for the first time, Lamu Island is now served by the national grid because of KETRACO. The same story applies to Garissa. When we energized the Kindaruma Mwengi Garissa line in 2016, we have for the first time taken the national grid to Garissa. And this has also increased the consumption of renewable energy. So you can clearly see hydros are being consumed. Wind is being consumed because of Luangalani Suswa. By the way, by energizing Luangalani Suswa, the country is saving almost 7 to 8 billion Kenya shillings on FCC. That's the fuel cost charge.
Yes.
Where the numbers have reduced from 5 shillings per kilowatt hour to 3 shillings per kilowatt hour. So when you do the aggregate savings, you're talking about an average of 8 billion Kenya shillings per year. And this, of course, now frees the money to be now channeled to other productive activities. So there are quite a number of benefits of these transmission lines. And then, of course, fiber comes in. By the way, our lines have OBW, which is a fiber cable that is on top, overhead. This fiber, we have now partnered with telecom companies. And we are now providing stable 4G internet connectivity by lighting that fiber. So there are quite a number of benefits which we can say are unexploited potential of our transmission framework.
All right.
Yeah.
Quite illustrative of the serious work that is happening at KETRACO.
Yes, yes.
And perhaps as we wrap up, MD, I'm keen to hear from you. Of course, in the midst of all this, challenges do stand in terms of getting waylifts, financial constraints, and what sort of support are you looking forward to getting from the national government?
One of the biggest challenges that we experience in this company, especially in our core mandate, is waylift, right of way. Most often than not, 80% of our challenges is because of waylift compensation. Landowners, of course, most of them, they expect exorbitant compensations.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have some socio-cultural issues where, for example, when you have a corridor traversing some graves, yeah, some communities are very sensitive. You cannot traverse a grave, so you're forced to do rerouting. And then also we have succession issues that affect our projects. But most often than not is compensation. And one of the mitigation which government has tried to assist is through the New Energy Act 2019, where the transmission corridor has now been given priority. Although the regulations are being worked on, because that's what will operationalize the New Energy Act 2019, to make it compulsory for KETRACO and any other infrastructure company doing projects, so that we give priority for a transmission project, and then of course compensation, which is supposed to be fair compensation, can now be given to the affected persons. So issues around waylift is a big challenge.
Okay.
And one of the approaches government has also helped us is through this interministerial committee chaired by Dr. Matiang'i that addresses some of the challenges where we get support from the regional commanders and county commissioners, basically to address the right of way.
All right.
So I must say that the government is really trying to help us on that front.
All right.
The other challenge, of course, is vandalism, especially where we are still doing construction. Most often than not, we have seen people cutting away our steel towers. We also had cases in Mombasa, Nairobi, around Embakasi, where our underground cable, 220 kV, was vandalized, even in its life. So those cases of vandalism, they become very expensive.
Okay.
Maybe just for the numbers, by a kilometer of vandalized 220 kV underground cable, it can cost almost $1 million. That's around 100 million Kenya shillings. So if you don't address some of those challenges, it becomes very expensive in the long run. And then, of course, we have also had challenges on some contractors who, after they come on board, they just ran into financial challenges, which, of course, slows down the construction work.
All right.
So areas around receiverships and poor contractors, it has actually affected KETRACO. But what we are doing, of course, is to do risk mitigation by just making sure that anytime we see the signs of a contractor maybe going under through receivership, we now take quick remedial action to address some of those inherent challenges.
Wow, what a mind-blowing conversation about the future of energy in Kenya and Africa. That has been that conversation with Mr. Fernandes Barasa, the Managing Director of KETRACO. A lot of projects in the pipeline, and Kenyans continue to hope and wait for cheaper and reliable energy. Well, from me and the entire team, that is bye-bye from us. See you next time. Remember, you can engage with us on our social media handles appearing at the bottom end of your screen. Until next time, keep safe.